time now to take a look through the papers with Diptyque Laurent. Diptyque, going to start with Chile taking quite an extraordinary decision to cancel hosting two major international summits.
That's right, that decision made by the Chilean President Sebastián Piñera, who announced the country will withdraw from hosting, first of all, the UN Climate Change Conference due to take place in December. And before that, around 20 countries were set to arrive for the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in mid-November, including Chinese leaders Xi Jinping and Donald Trump. That won't be happening either. Piñera's on the front page of the Chinese newspaper, the Global Times today. Now, Chile has been gripped by weeks of deadly protests sparked by a proposed hike in subway fares. It's grown into this wider movement around inequality. The Guardian today talks to some of those protesters who are taking part in this movement, asking them why they're taking to the streets. And you know, there are different protesters. There's a teacher, a makeup artist, a filmmaker, lots of students who are interviewed. But they all have one thing in common, which is economic woes, the money problems, basically. They all talk of rising costs, of stagnant salaries, and evoke the idea that the Chilean people have modernized, but the country seemingly hasn't.
So what are the national newspapers saying?
Well, from the front page of El Mercurio, the paper's talking about how former advisors to the Chilean Foreign Ministry are warning the government of the damage that cancelling these summits will have on the country's international reputation. Now, according to another Chilean paper, that decision to cancel those summits came up really last week, after last Friday's demonstration that saw a million people take to the streets. The paper saying that Piñera's decision came about to signal to the protesters that he is empathetic with their cause and he is worried about their problems.
Okay. Turning our attention to some stories here in France now, and the President, Emmanuel Macron, has become the first president to give an interview to a far-right magazine.
That's right, that magazine is called Valeurs Actuelles. It is known for its incendiary front pages. It's been fined multiple times in the past for inciting hatred in its magazine. Emmanuel Macron spoke to this magazine. Not only that, he's actually plugged the magazine, so to speak, as a way of saying that it's a way of knowing how the right wing think. And in this long interview, he evokes topics like deportation, the Islamic headscarf, and economic integration. On the Islamic headscarf, he says he doesn't have a problem with women wearing the attire as long as it's, quote, her choice, and that the children are well integrated. This, of course, relating to a case of a mother who was accompanying school students wearing the headscarf to French Parliament, and local Parliament was asked to remove it. Now, this interview coming at a opportune time, you might say. Macron is, of course, trying to court the right ahead of municipal elections next year.
Diptyque, you've also spotted some reactions to Twitter's decision to ban political advertising from its platform.
That's right. That message coming from Twitter's CEO, Jack Dorsey himself, on Twitter yesterday. One small step for Jack, one giant leap for tweetkind. That's how the New York Times, a little tongue-in-cheek, it puts on its in this article today, describes this surprising decision as putting the ball firmly in the court of Facebook now, hence the title, Your Move Facebook. The paper says that cleaning up political ads is admittedly some of Twitter's, quote, low-hanging and less problematic fruits. Nonetheless, Dorsey has made a dare to the whole internet power structure, and in particular to rivals Facebook, which does have the biggest reach when it comes to things like political advertising. The paper's picking up also on the fact that on the same day as Dorsey's announcement, Facebook posted large profits in its earnings report. How Mark Zuckerberg will react to Twitter's first move remains to be seen, but for the Frankfurter Allgemeine, these two internet giants are on collision course in a battle for moral superiority, I quote.
Okay. Moving on now, but staying actually in the United States. And before I go further, if anybody like me would be lost, we're going to talk about baseball. The Nationals from Washington have defeated the Astros from Houston in the World Series for the first time in nearly a century, Diptyque.
That's right. I admit I don't know much about baseball either, but our producer, Chris, who's from Washington, is obsessed, and he's kind of been the go-to person this morning. So he proofread this copies of this. If I get something wrong, you can blame him, not me. Anyway, Washington fans are no doubt celebrating their team's win in the World Series yesterday which went right down to the wire. The 7th game, the Nationals clinching victory over the Houston Astros, winning 6-2. It's the first time in nearly 100 years that the title has come back to Washington, and it's the first title for this team, the Nationals, because back in the 1900s when they won, it was a different team. It's also the first World Series in the history of the sport in which the home team has not won a single game.
Oh, interesting. Finally, Diptika, from you, you found a story about modern dating with a bit of an old twist.
Well, it turns out that more and more people are eschewing, the slightly creepy geo-localized way of hooking up these days on dating apps. And for the old school personal ads, Eve, that used to be taken out in the local newspaper, but it's with a modern twist. So they're not actually taking out personal ads in the newspaper. But one woman, for instance, has created an app that allows people to send in their personal apps the way they would write it in a newspaper. But it's on this app, so people can peruse these apps and sort of find out which people they like. People say that it's allowed them to slow down the dating process. It's also forced people to really think about who they are and what they desire, as opposed to, just a pic and a 2-line bio and swiping left or swiping right. The great thing is also these apps target certain groups. So you have LGBTQIA community apps. You even have some for socialists, if you're like-minded like socialists.
Yeah, okay, Diptika, good to know. Thanks a lot for that wrap-up of the international papers. Time for us to take a quick break now, but still to come in the next half hour of the show, our Focus Report will be taking a look at the dangers of taking a taxi in Mexico City in particular and what's being done about it. So far this year, 200 cases of rape, abduction or murder by taxi drivers have been reported. Find out more after the break.